Okay, very nice too that you are able to be here with us today. And I'm sure, I don't know how much you look at Wikipedia, but I expect if you do, and if you do at all today, I don't know how long you're going to be here, but I'm sure there's a lot of things that are, um, missing and incorrect, misinformed, and that's what we're working to change here at Penn State and all over the world, actually. Many groups are getting together. That there is a very small number of people that actually add the content to Wikipedia, and they are mostly white males, I think heterosexuals, I'm not sure if that's the profile, and between the ages of about 20 and 30, and that's like about 85%, I believe. And so there is, so just part of it is actually getting people that don't normally um, create knowledge or think that they can create knowledge to feel empowered to be able to do so. And so my experiences in teaching this is that the sense of like fear, there's no way I can do this, to the sense of total empowerment, like, wow, I made those changes and they stayed. And we will look at some of those examples. Oh, wow, here comes Susan Hill. Perfect. Come on in. Wonderful.
Well, my name is Susan Hill, and I am really, really, really delighted to be here. And you may know, worked with Judy Chicago on the Women Party. I was literally the first person who walked through the door in Judy's studio in October of 1975, probably well before your parents were born. And because I had attended a lecture of hers where she was talking about the pyrotechnics, which are absolutely spectacularly gorgeous. And someone in the audience asked her at the very end, what are you doing now that's new? Do you have a new project? And she said, well, I'm working on something that'll need some help. And so it's a big table honoring women. So I wrote her a note and invited myself to the studio, and we began to talk. And out of that came the idea for making the runners. The runners were not conceived of at that time. It was a table with the same equilaterally turned table, the same 4, the same 13 place settings on a side. But what Judy wanted was to
Yeah, for you to speak up a little bit, and I'm also going to keep moving this a little bit closer.
Okay. But what Judy wanted was a machine embroidered with the names of the women by the plates, and we quickly decided that technically was going to be really problematic and flawed. So I suggested doing it by hand, and then out of that, showing her what traditional models for runners over altars came the runners. And so my famous line, which I love, and I continue to use, is that Judy started me out doing research. The Virgin Mary. Write that down for Wikipedia, the Virgin Mary. And I was terrible at it. So I really don't fit in the Wikipedia one. I'm terrible at research. And Judy was fretting because I was terrible at research, and I was the only person she had. So she invited in Diane Gellin, who has become a dear, long-term friend of mine, to do the research. She's much better at it. And Judy said to me, what can you do? And somehow out of my mouth came, I can cook and I can sew. And from that, I have had a really fantastic and amazing and wonderful feminist walk forward for, 50 years or something, I think 40. So I am really delighted to be here, and we're thrilled, of course, having been in the studio in the very, very early days and see these things come together tiny, bit by bit, understanding that we were undertaking something that was a monumental project. We really understood and felt the weight of the obligation that we had to bring the work forward. So I'm thrilled to be here among tribes, people who are working with the archives, who will continue to bring this work forward and invent new ways. If we were in Maine, instead of calling you artists or scholars, the word would be cultivators. We're here together today as cultivators. And in Maine, that's because it's not only the artists that are included, but the craftspeople and the farmers and the cooks and the fishermen and the people who wait on tables that are inclusive in what makes the everyday life. But it's all based in nurturance, creativity, and really high standards. So we would be together here today as cultivators. I'll say very briefly that after the dinner party, I then, as did Diane Gallen, and our dear friend Peter Bunsick, we continued to travel with the dinner party as it went from installation to installation. We would arrive with it to put it up, and we would go back and dust it and clean it and put it in its perfectly beautiful place and make sure that it was sent away while we waited for the next piece. And that's a phenomenon in and of itself. And invite me back sometime for an hour, and we will just talk about the ritual of putting the dinner party up. There's really something, it's not an easy job to put a white linen tablecloth that's 60 feet long and 6 feet wide onto a table on a porcelain floor. And it's done in the most beautiful way. And the other thing that's really great is that we have to iron a lot of stuff. I don't know how Judy and I did this, but we managed to make a work of art that both needs the floor polished and the tablecloth ironed. Because we did iron, we also would blow the electrical circuits in the museums, and the guys with the tool belts would say, "Oh, they're just irons," and I would say, "No, really, we're going to blow the circuit, so you really want to like amp the power in this art," and then we would, and it was really fun. But the whole ritual of the way that the dinner party is put in place, and the extension that's made to the people in the community, and it doesn't matter whether you knew about the dinner party or not. As you're putting those pieces down, it's so clear that they're handmade, that they were made by hand, by people. They're gorgeous. And literally that ritual of setting this ceremonial table is very much at the heart of how you feel about it when you see it. And I think that that's part of a deep feminist principle or human principle in the way that the exhibition was conceived and needs to be. But after the dinner party, not only did I travel with it with Diane and Peter, which was fantastic, but then I went on to do collaborative, community-based artist work in Los Angeles for a long time. And so my work has been not as a traditional artist who worked in the studio with something singular to say for a particular audience, and that a lot of my validation would then depend on an art world venue and criticism that validated the importance of what I was doing. Instead, because I loved the collaboration, and Jane's book is so exemplary in how she speaks of the collaborative, the really innovative collaborative process within the studio, which is very often misunderstood. So that's another hour. Mm-hmm. But I was so thrilled to have found this transparent process, comes a new person, the process of collaboration, the very interesting and flexible hierarchical structure of the studio, the adherence to a central aesthetic and point of view, but room for, it worked so well because we listened to what people's skills were, and they went to work using their best skills. So you can feel, in some ways, the multiplicity of voices within this very coherent piece. That whole process was fantastic. And I used that as then I went in, first I worked with Judith Francesca Baca, who is the founder of SPARC, S-P-A-R-C, the Social and Public Art Resource Center in Los Angeles, where she still is. She is one of the premier and most important muralists in the city of Los Angeles. She now has murals that are placed elsewhere. And one of her most interesting and portable murals is called the World Wall, which invites artists from other countries to have made a panel. They're done on canvas. They're 60 feet long. I think they're 10 feet high and 60 feet long, and they can be transported and set up, but they are visions of peace from around the world. So Judy, I worked with Judy. She also has, welcome.
Born January 4th, Sophia Anna.
Oh, and in school already.
Yeah.
I worked with Judy Baca as a community resource specialist while she was doing one of the long panels for the Great Wall of Los Angeles, which is the history of Los Angeles from the point of view of people who are not included in the history. It's a fantastic thing. And then I went on to become an artist in residence in California State Prisons for Women. Very interesting constituency. We made a triptych quilt that is called When Prison is Home. But there's central images of women as friends. There are images of the neighborhoods they came from. Some of those all done in fabric and quilting, and some of those were done by their children when they would come to visit. And then on the right-hand panel are images of women falling through time and doing time in prison. And then we sent that out and around to exhibit it. We brought people in from the outside. Eventually, 100 people from the outside came into the prison and worked with the women who were in the prison. It was really quite a phenomenal endeavor because part of it was the introduction then of seeing the other. Terry Bleacher from the dinner party, who was one of the extraordinary artists there, one of the most extraordinary artists there. And we can go around the table and point out Terry's work. But it went from everything, which is Boadicea, the yellow felt Scottish warrior Amazon woman, to Margaret Sanger, which is that incredible red anatomical drawing on pink satin. She did George O'Keeffe. Judy wasn't gonna pass George O'Keeffe over to anybody but Terry. And she's done many, many others. But Terry and I did this project together, brought other people with us, worked with our contemporaries who were incarcerated women in California, many of them very notorious. And when we exhibited it, we never said who made what. And it would infuriate the public that they did not know who was free and who was not. It confused them. They had to know that before they could judge the work. And so we never told them.
Uh-huh.
And we found that very interesting. But that was then the beginning of parting of going places into a community, into a specific community as a traveler, and learning to be other. And for that, what I like to think of it is there's a phrase that is called, we make the road by walking. And that's what that work was. And then I went on to be the director of a nonprofit that created paid artist in residence programs for artists to work together collaboratively in specific places, neighborhoods, institutions where the arts would not otherwise exist, and create long-term projects for social change. And we had a theater company, and we had dancers, and we had painters, and we had cartoonists, and writers, and poets, and worked in places from East Los Angeles and Watts, and in the prison system, and with gang kids, and there's a bunch of places you can find in Southern California that are. But so, and out of that, my mentors in that very often were other people doing the work who are amazing. A lot of theater people, love theater people, love improvisational theater, including Auguste Boal, and was fortunate enough, because he would come to Los Angeles, to sit in workshops with the Dalai Lama. I'm still struggling with compassion, and but this way, and also sit with a medicine man from the Rosebud Reservation would come to the Ojai Foundation, and we would do sweat lodges, stone people lodges, in 3 days of teaching. So this way of since then of being able to listen in to what's required, to understand that what you're looking at is looking back at you, of trying to be other, but at the same time trying to know intuitively what I know and who I am in order to stand up for, in the feminist way, for knowing when the information is not correct, that's coming out, that is not correct, and how to correct it, and how to correct it with empathy for power. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's big and sketchy, but what I am most interested in from that perspective, from somebody who I would always go and work in the community myself. I would design the programs and raise money, and there were lots of people working, but I would always go and work myself. So, but it's a way of working as an artist, I think, that creates tribe. It's different than a singular work. I love that sort of multiplicity of avenues in the world for people to use their skills and to be in the world and continue to move culturally, to move back and forth, but with great sensitivity, and you make a lot of mistakes, but if your best ally is to be quiet and listen. But it's from that I'm really, really interested in hearing what you're interested in, what you're working on, and pull anything out of what my experiences have been, either in the dinner party, in the creation of the dinner party, in the aesthetics of the dinner party, politics of the dinner party, or any of the artist in residency work that I've done. So I'll be quiet now. And you too. No, really, I am. It's a miraculous and fantastic thing. The International Honors Quilt is now up in Louisville, and you all are doing this. And I went online last night, and Kutztown is having a dinner party institute this June. Yes, July.
Every summer.
Every summer.
Yeah.
And are going into to Brooklyn to look at the piece and train people to do that work. Mm-hmm. So it's humbling and gratifying. So, I'm here at the buffet, and so pick and choose.
And I want to point out, the bottom book down there is the dinner party, one of the dinner party books. And if you, wanted to see any of those images or anything like that, to know that there. But yeah, this, Jane, I love the idea of listening as a feminist practice, and that is very much a part of what Judy has articulated in my work with her about her feminist pedagogical practice as listening. As she calls it, active listening.
Yes.
And it's absolutely just very
Phenomenal.
much a part of the feminist practice teaching. And I know Leslie has been in a couple classes in which, we spent a lot of time thinking about that, talking about that in different ways to make sure, for instance, that we went around the circle, we did the circle pedagogy, as Judy calls it, but we also did things like in the one class to have a metaphor, an object of a metaphor, that we moved that in front of whoever was speaking. The metaphor had a lot to do with the topic of that day, and it both was like activated our conversations, but it also visibly showed if that object, say, was sitting in front of me too long, we would know I was doing too much talking. So it became a physical kind of way where if one or two students are doing all the talking and others are not, and so we would throw it across. So if I'm talking, I'm like throwing it over to you and, trying to bring you into the conversation, but also recognizing I just talked too long here. So that listening is incredibly important to Chicago pedagogy.
It is. And it is allied with the council circles that are an indigenous practice of sitting in a circle and listening to each other while a talking piece is moved around. And the best part about it is that it eliminates crosstalk, so that each person then owns what. Have you ever tried it? Have you all ever tried it? Oh, we need to try it. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about how interesting it is that Judy is the one advocating for listening, because one of the powerful things about her as a historical actor is how forceful and strong she is in her speaking, and how important it is that she says and did what she did loudly. So I wanted to, I think it's always a sort of tension that we're holding around listening as a feminist practice and speaking as also a feminist act for women. I mean, here we are trying to revise Wikipedia because women's voices have not been included. So I think it's different than the tribalism that you're talking about, Susan, which is just lovely, and I'm such a fan of that model of artistic production. As well, obviously, as that creative genius who is loud and takes up a lot of space.
Yeah. I mean, speaking way back, it was one of, you have to understand, it's like I'm from a time capsule, I mean, I was born in 1943. My mother wore aprons. And, when I went to college, I had to sign out of the dorm with my parents' permission if I left after 10 o'clock. I'm from another time. So when we met together in 1975, and I'll look this up, women's studies had not been invented. The AIDS epidemic had not happened yet. We were just coming out of being fabulous hippies with beautiful clothes and soft music and kind of really a tranquil, colorful way of being into things like the killing in Kent State and the Vietnam War and then the civil rights movement. I was fortunate in my time to have been in the room with Martin Luther King and with Malcolm X. Somebody smart at my college got them to come and speak on different days. They got Ravi Shankar to come and play in a little room. I mean, I saw Bob Dylan sitting on the stage with, in Massachusetts, yeah. And I saw Bob Dylan sitting on stage because we took a bus in to Cambridge to see John Baez sing. this is before so this is out of this different time. And then you go into this 2,000 square foot studio with, have you met Judy? She's about that high, but a dynamo. And she was, what, 30? I was 29. She had $25,000 a year income now, so she thought she could own the world. It was amazing. But we were quiet. We were polite. We were not important. And so we had to learn to work with Judy. We had to learn. When Judy was loud, we had to learn to stand our ground. There was a lot of pushback that, like, Judy should be nicer. No, we needed to stand our ground. We needed to know what we knew. We needed to be able to be in conversation with her. She's not everybody, but she's brilliant. And that's another thing I think you need to learn, is that if somebody is brilliant like that, they are the diamond edge that's cutting the way. I come along. I make the road by walking. And walking is a process of stand up, fall down, stand up, fall down, stand up, fall down. Judy is really making the way. It's extraordinary.
I also, everybody on Adobe Connect and Han and Sarah, any questions or comments or that you want to?
Yes, it's something.
I want to know kind of what's in your mind here, and then we had also thought to go around the circle, but we might. I'm not sure if we want to have food first or not. So, but first, I just want to open it up for just questions or comments from what you've heard, and open it up.
This has been great. I mean, I came here thinking I wouldn't be able to contribute much, but I just wanted to learn from you guys, kind of observe what was going on today. I don't know, I've always considered myself a feminist, but realized I'm not as active as I probably should be. And I know very little about the dinner party, which is ridiculous. I don't know, I'm realizing that I need to explore more what's valuable here.
Sarah, I would say that there's a lot of press and some of that societal things that are maybe why you don't know about the dinner party, because there's a certain sense too, as a young woman, that that this is something from the past. This is this 70s feminism,
Right.
And so even in and so there's that aspect. And there's other parts about the media, which you brought up, Susan, about the sense of this powering figure that, it's not really collaboration. It's not all these other things that people talk about feminism. And again, that's a lot of the patriarchal art world, painting. So there's there's a broader thing, and then there's the patriarchal thing. And so and then even within feminism, that still comes up, and also just looking those that put feminism into waves and such, and then discount. So there's all those things that are, it's not an accident that you don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's not an accident.
I think the one thing we're talking about with it being a collaborative work but getting criticism, right, about Judy Chicago's collaborative project, and maybe not people feeling that the other artists such as yourselves within the work were not recognized to the same level. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think that's something that that I've heard repeatedly about. Right. It's something that's an undercurrent when you think of Judy Chicago's work, that comes up as one of the negative things associated with her work. As a matter of fact, one of the classes that I'm in this semester, there's a fellow peer who's looking into that specific subject within Judy's work that I'm thinking of. So I don't know, how do you, obviously you don't agree with that critique.
No, and I was there.
And you were there, yeah, you were part of it. So it'd be interesting to hear more of what is this collaborative work? What's this criticism that a lot of times is wrong?
Right, thank you. And Leslie, you're studying, you're putting forward the feminist curatorial,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. Because I think in dovetailing with what you were saying as well as this patriarchal, and I think also part of it is in the art world competitiveness, a figure as strong and as clear-minded as Judy often in the art world can also be really domineering and obnoxious and yada yada. No, it was collaborative in that, but it was also a hierarchy in the same way that an atelier out of the Renaissance time was a hierarchy with a master artist and a singular vision. And it was very clear that this was a work of Judy's. She had a track record for works in which many, many people participated. Woman House is a very, very good example of that. And so we came willingly, and people for whom this didn't work, the idea of coming in to work on a large-scale project, we asked for a lot of time. I think it was a minimum of 16 hours a week that someone had to provide. So your own life, your own work became a secondary thing often. But if you were not willing to do that, it was very clear right off the bat. So if you were there, you tried it out, and you were incredibly supportive of and engaged with the overall objective. You knew it was about women's history. Then Judy also was extremely generous in many ways. The studio was an open studio. Everybody could see everybody all the time. You could see Judy all the time, and you could watch her work and struggle and things break and how she worked. So there was a model that was irreplaceable, actually, for what you did. Then there were design sessions that were carefully scheduled and ran regularly for the runners in particular. I think Judy should speak about the plates. She worked with a team there. I think they gave comments to each other back and forth as plates were developed. But certainly the runners were always, you could sign up for the team. You had to know the history of the woman who was going to be portrayed on the runner, the context of the time, what materials would have been appropriate to that age and her life. And we all worked together with Judy to make those designs. I can show you places on there where it's directly, that's what Adrienne Weiss drew, that's what we produced, that's what it looked like, and as long as it worked with Judy's aesthetic, there was this incredible give and take. There were people, Judy would come to certain people at times and say, how do we do this? What do you think? Can I leave it in your hands? There was this incredibly generous and fluid, creative energy at work that was coupled with discipline. The other thing, very quickly, is for every exhibition, as you entered, it said a piece created by Judy Chicago in collaboration with a community of women and men. There are documentation panels that travel with it, with a photograph of everybody that worked substantially, and that's several hundred people, with a biography, and then the names of everybody who contributed something small in terms of work. The Brooklyn Museum refuses to hang. Really.
More of the artwork is
As it happens, yes. Hello. So thinking curatorially, but those names are listed in the books. They were always on the website. Judy always acknowledges people when she speaks, but those kinds of things are often. Is that helpful?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Jane, if you wanted to jump in, I'm looking your comments about the, that Judy always gave attribution to males, and so when you said that about, I'm quite sure Judy had told me the same thing, that she had really wanted and asked, and they just, I don't know why they just didn't put up the panels.
Right. What's troubling curatorially is that the dinner party was designed not only with the table and the floor and the banners, but also and specific colors and the way that it gets lit, so it's incredibly dazzling and visible. But also there are history panels and there are the documentation panels. There's a way that you enter the dinner party according to the design that we developed for exhibiting it, that you enter a hushed space and you see the banners and you read the prayer and you come through, the table opens up in front of you at the front point. And the pieces for the history panels and the documentation panels are very much part of the artist's vision, presenting it very feminine. Hi, here's the history. Now, one of the things Brooklyn wanted to do in changing the way the room is structured, which they did recently, was they put the history panels out front. And then that was really uncomfortable to us because that suddenly got didactic. We don't want you to read the history first. We want you to have the experience of this being revealed to you. And if then you want to know more, here are these panels with these images and portraits and small biographies and links that give you that. And Brooklyn, oh, really? But it's ours. We can put it up. So there's some, I think, deep respect that needs to be questioned of when an artist has a vision of integrity, a whole vision. It's not just the table. That's not the only work of art there. Right. And the generosity with the education, the information. Here. No more. And I think part of what was really beautiful is the documentation panels are the history of the women who are in the work itself. And then here are the faces of the people who need it. And, there's that lovely joining across time that happens there.
Yeah, so, well, that also ties in, Leslie, with the notion of curating, because that's what gets in and what doesn't get in. And so this becomes a perception of people interested in art and coming to this and not having read Jane Gerhardt's book, perhaps, and seeing this missing and thinking that they wouldn't even know it existed, really, let alone, but really it was an institution's decision, which we could call part of that art world decision, that is based very differently than on this notion of collaboration that Judy saw needed to happen to make, basically joining forces to make this vision happen. And there's almost always, and sometimes there's a grassroots and several people, sometimes it's one person that actually is the, inspiration, as in this, not only inspiration, but carry the vision forward. Jane, I think you were about to say something as well.
I was just, Susan beautifully addressed the, lack of this idea that Judy didn't attribute the labor properly to those whose work she depended on. And I was just kind of thinking about actually Leslie and your curatorial focus, and it strikes me as perhaps some ambivalence on the part of the Brooklyn curators around really recognizing the tribalism that Susan's talking about, like the kind of hierarchy, yet still a collaborative process that went on to make that. But there's somehow hard for the art world to digest.
It talks about visibility. I mean, that's creating visibility. It seems quite intentional.
Right. It also sort of follows the art world model, because somebody like, let's say, Richard Serra has lots of people work with him, but when you see the work installed, it's Richard Serra.
Right.
He never says.
Yeah, and
whereas Judy goes out of her way to say.
Right. It was all these other people.
Yeah, unlike most male artists, as Jane says here.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can, get our plates of food and take a bit of a break, and then carry on the conversation around the table with food.
Well, right now I'm sitting in Linda Stein's studio all by myself, and I've been by myself for the last couple weeks, I guess. Maybe it's only been a week, but so it's kind of nice to be with people right now. I'm working on several projects at once. I didn't hear really what you said in the beginning, Karen. You want me to talk about my work?
Yeah, just really introducing your work, your research more, the things that both what you've already researched, the things that you know a lot about, basically, and are continually being interested in. And, of course, we're still centering around Art+Feminism, but thinking of it in terms of where, well, you don't even have to think about that, but we'll start thinking about how we might look on Wikipedia to see how those ideas are represented. So first, really just talking about your the things that you're working on. Sometimes it's through teaching, sometimes it's through research. You finish your dissertation, just all that stuff, just in your own sort of way of looking back and forward.
Okay. So, so my dissertation work that was connected to the archives was built around this idea of how records are mediated by people and shared, and I guess all the sort of products that kind of result from an experience, a lived experience, and and how those things get translated. So in particular, the dissertation was looking at feminist teaching conversations with the Judy Chicago Art Education Collection, in how faculty were using and experiencing her archive, and how this was being translated into pedagogy. What continues to interest me is the products and the experience of a pedagogy. So I'm working on several projects at once, but and in a sense, like how these things get translated. So what's kind of interesting to me about the Wikipedia is the fact that it's crowdsourced and put together as a social network. And then also, like in listening to Susan talk about her experience working with Judy Chicago, how these stories get translated over time and how they get interpreted and reinterpreted. All that is very interesting to me, because it's there's not really any one singular voice there that's defining what it is and what it was. And
in telling that story and in going through all these materials that are left behind, you have this ability to like reanimate what's there, but also sort of disturb what's not there. So that's what I'm interested in.
And you're also now working with Linda Stein, and you're doing like about everything there.
Yeah.
But one of the things, the curriculum, an interesting sort of parallel, and if you want to, I'm thinking about the tapestries in relation to the dinner party, and really, and we're also creating a counter to around that, having encounters with different kinds of work. You want to talk about the tapestries, or?
Yeah. Well, you mean the Holocaust Heroes tapestries are each representing a woman during the Holocaust that did heroic deeds, and they're put together with fragments of archives, in a sense, and artifacts that kind of represent what might have been, or they give a textural kind of sense of the person. And they're juxtaposed with metaphors of like Wonder Woman and different iconography that represent strength and power. And there's the one tapestry in the back there, that's the Sugahara. I'm probably saying her name wrong. She's, let me just look again. Oh, she's not on the brochure. She is one of the Holocaust heroes that Linda had initially included, and was then basically, after consultation with the board, was basically, because her story is slightly troubling, because she was a hero during the time, but then later spoke out against Jews, and actually none of this is really proven. And so she's not included in these 10 heroes now, because it was thought that it might come across as being an insult to the Holocaust victims. The tapestries are really reflective of an interpretation, and they're put together to, in a sense, kind of weave together a life and an event and a moment.
Sorry. So I was talking about my work with feminist curating, and lending voice and representing stories that have historically been invisible in culture and society, which is really everything we're talking about now, right? I'm specifically looking at Latin American and Caribbean female artists. My research stems from Cuba. I'll just give the example of the talk that I just recently did a couple of weeks ago. Here at the Museum of Art on campus, where I went into the database similar to what Karen had done, just to see what there was there's about 8,000 works in the permanent collection, and wanted to see what would emerge from me going into the database and what would kind of strike me. And much of what you were saying earlier, Karen, about, where our expertise or our set of eyes and experiences have strategically placed me, for example, right? And so in going through the database, wanting to see how many Latin American and Caribbean artists emerged from that. There was very few, 27 to be exact, out of 8,000 permanent collection works. Okay. So out of those 27, only
27 works.
Yeah.
Out of 8,000.
Oh my God.
Only 7 were female. artists from Latin America,
So
one from the
7 out of
Caribbean, which is
8,000,
Cuba.
basically.
Yeah. So then I chose two Latin American women and one Caribbean one, which was Ana Mendieta's work. She's Cuban. She was Cuban American. And then the two was one from Argentina and one from Mexico. And I asked to see all three of their works. And the two out of the three was the first time they've never been exhibited in the museum space. And in particular, the one, Josefina Aguilar,
The ceramicist?
yeah, you're the first person who knows who she is.
I'm from Los Not only do I know who she is, but I have her stuff.
You do?
I do.
Oh my gosh. So I wanted to see her work, right? Because there wasn't any images to go along
And
with
her
the
sisters.
database. Yes. Right. Okay. So, yes, it's fantastic. To speak with someone who knows something about her.
The market women.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So would you believe that there is 15 of her works, of Josefina's works, here at the Palmer Museum of Art. Never been exhibited until February 19th when I brought them out because I wanted them part of a one-day exhibit. No one knew anything about her or her work.
Or her family.
Or her family or anything.
It was her father and then the sisters.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Wait, I'm sorry, what did you say?
No,
Go ahead. Yeah, her sister.
Wasn't her father a ceramicist as well?
So
This is the interesting story, yeah.
So this is the interesting. When I started doing research about her, that's what was believed for a long time, that it was her father who was a ceramicist. But in fact, it was actually her mother.
Oh no.
Yes.
Let's get that out in the recording. Oh no.
It was actually her mother. And her mother was this brilliant, she actually created two genres of ceramics works from folk art, Mexican folk art in her town and village of her people, which is still used to this day in the Dia de los Muertos celebrations. But very little credit has been given to their mother. And in fact,
really?
the credit that has been given has been her daughters are the ones that are instrumental for bringing that to light, that it was their mother, and trying to rectify the history, rewrite the history.
Now.
So the father actually was the businessman. So he was the one who did, because he could read and write, he was the one that would do the business transactions for his wife. And that is why the word kind of that was fabricated was that the works were his and that he raised his four daughters to also be ceramicists. And in fact, that's not the story.
Wow.
So all of this is what came about my research from all of this. And
on top of that, go to the next step about then the museums now learning this information.
Right, because she's internationally, their artwork is internationally, as you know, their ceramic artwork is internationally known and collected in galleries and museums.
Yeah, there's quite a few pieces in Santa Fe in the International Folk Museum there, among other places.
Right, yeah.
That just seems so weird.
So museums and galleries have tried to rectify this by labeling the artwork as Aguilar clan or Aguilar family, but not specifically attributing to their mother's name. Now Josefina's, she's pretty renowned and marks her own works and stuff, so her case is a little bit different, right, because they're signed and everything, but her mother's work, a large part of it, are still out there and people don't know that it's hers.
Oh my.
Or think that it's just part of the family, someone in the family did it, or that it was her husband.
What's her first name, the mother?
Inaura, I think.
Okay.
Inaura.
Yes, I forgot.
Wow. Yeah.
I just want to respectfully know her name.
Is she still alive, Josefina?
Josefina is alive.
Yeah, she's like in her 80s, so
right? She's very, and her three sisters, and and they do all ceramic work, very different. They have a brother who's also a ceramicist and artist as well.
Because when you see it together, you can tell
that
this is Josefina and
who
it
stands out, right? Yeah. And so Josefina's is the most similar to her mother's work out of the four of them.
Wow.
Out of the four
so
sisters.
you can see Anne's reaction, Susan's reaction, my reaction, this is something you got to write about.
Yeah.
You need to write in your own publishing articles, but we can also work with the Wikipedia entry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, of course.
Because that, I mean, you probably on your computer can pull up your paper and your
Right,
research
yes, I do.
and your citations of where you got this stuff from.
Right.
And we can put that, that's something
Yeah.
that, you know,
Yeah.
might be more doable within
Right.
today.
That's a very
To
good
think
point,
about
Jen,
that,
yeah.
that point,
I didn't
because
think
that is so important to get that out there.
The other thing
you know, like,
that this sheds light on too is that you can have your materials archived, but it just gets buried in the archive. So this idea of the living curriculum is really important because it dictates that it's not just a select few that have that should be able to access the materials and also contribute to it.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that when I requested to see the pieces in person, when it was shown to me that they told me the people who work in the museum said, we have no info on any of this, so anything that
How
you
did they
find
get it?
out,
They didn't have
please let us know.
so they didn't have like a deed of like what they must have had some paperwork on it. How did they even acquire the materials?
Yes. But the paperwork that they had, it was donated to the museum years ago by someone who, I guess it was someone faculty here at Penn State or something.
Was it Ken Vidal or something?
Or Ed Mattel?
Yeah. That you recognize.
Yeah, it was either Ed Mattel or Ken Vidal. I forget one of those.
And it was, you know, on his travels with his wife, they picked up these pieces of folk art that they liked, and then it was eventually donated to the museum. And that's it. That was the extent of what they knew.
Right. I would love to watch this with you and talk about it. So I have this here, and I'm thinking, you know, after you come back, then maybe more chocolates and tangerines or whatever, and we can watch this, and I'd love to watch it with you, and then you know, talk about it, or even since I've watched it before too, we can actually even talk a little bit during. And
I'll be right. So okay.
And I'm very interested in, you know, like some of the stories that she can say around the filming of it and the experience of being there. And
throughout the 1960s, I was very isolated as a woman artist and very embattled. And I turned to the past, and I discovered that by looking at other women's lives, I found a certain kind of nourishment and a certain kind of resonance that amplified and explained the experience I was having. The more I studied, the more I realized that there was this huge body of information, an enormous amount of richness in women's heritage, and that not only I, but most people knew nothing about it. In 1893, they convened in Chicago the World's Congress of Representative Women, the first in the world to assemble. And of the 150,000 who passed the gates, not one but who demanded to see and hear the woman whose name was known, all unsuspected by Americans the world over, Susan B. Anthony. On days when she was advertised to speak, a squad of police had to be sent to keep the corridors from a dangerous jam. I love this. They required two stout police to get Susan through the crowds to the platform and afterward out of the building to her carriage. When she rose to speak, men and women climbed on their seats, threw hats and handkerchiefs into the air, and cheered themselves hoarse before she could utter a word. After 50 years of poverty, misrepresentation, abuse, vilification, Susan, as poor at 73 as she had been at 30, was lifted into the ranks of the immortals. One thing I learned from my studies of history was that even though women achieved, those achievements would be erased the next decade, the next generation. I wanted to challenge that process, to end that process, to honor those achievements, and to introduce them into the society through a work of art that would symbolize our heritage so that those achievements could never be erased from history again. We didn't know how high or how wide the table had to be. So in July of 1976, the first summer of the project, we built a mock-up of the corner to figure out scale and proportion. I am probably prouder of the work we have done on Byzantium, on women in Byzantium, than on anything else we have done in the whole project. And we have found out there was a long tradition of very strong and powerful women in Byzantine, that women were had a lot of rights, partly because of Theodora, who was incredibly concerned about women. She, for example, made rape subject to the death penalty. She drastically altered the status of women in the culture. She had all these laws passed to give women property rights, educational rights. It took a research team in the studio about 2 years to accumulate the 3,000 names from which the 999 were chosen. I'll tell you the A marriage ceremony in Sparta. In Sparta, the woman was abducted or carried off by the bridegroom. And then she was taken to a place where there were other women who would prepare her for the actual consummation of the marriage. And they would cut her hair short so that she looked like a man. And they dressed her in men's clothing. And then they put her in this dark room on a mattress. And she lay there. Okay. Meanwhile, her husband is out drinking and having dinner with his male friends. And then he sneaks away. So he goes to this room. He finds his way in. And then he consummates the marriage with the woman. In some cases, they never even saw the face of the woman in daylight until after the first children had been born. We could only afford salaries for 3 of the key people. Everybody else worked without pay. Work schedule in the studio was 6 and 7 days a week, all the time. We worked from early in the morning till quite late at night. Thursday nights were special. Then we got together for a potluck dinner, invited in guests to speak, or used the time to work out studio problems. And I think feminism is a philosophy that says that every human being's life experience has meaning and has value. And that feminist thought challenges the assumptions of whose experience is important. That is the experience of those people in power more important than those people out of power? And the symbol for all that is women.